Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And my guest today is Vanessa Gonzales, and she is a transgender advocate and a social justice educator. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for having me.
So I'd like to dive right in. So you are a transgender woman, yes?
Correct.
And let's talk a little bit about that journey, because I think there's a lot of kind of confusion, sometimes even aversion through the confusion, and even chaotic thinking around it. So let's kind of dispel some of that. So you and I were talking about how when you were about 5 years old, you kind of noticed that there was something about the things that you were interested in that kind of indicated to you that something was different. So let's talk about that.
Yes, like as you said, when I was younger, I was very close to one of my younger cousins, Natalie, and I would love playing with her toys and things like that, and doing the things that she would do. We'd always go to volleyball together and things like that. And I remember learning by people's reactions, especially from my own family, of that it's not what I was supposed to be doing, right?
Right. So if you played with her toys, it was like...
Yeah, it was
you were
taboo.
Told, yeah,
Taboo.
And I think as a little child, like if I'm thinking to 5 years old, you kind of know that there's something wrong, but you're not clear about what it is. It's like something's wrong, probably something's wrong with me, but not sure. Was that sort of what it was like?
Yes, I was very confused. Right, I didn't understand why I was being told not to do these things, because this is what I wanted to do. This is who I was, and I knew for that from a very young age. So for me, growing up and getting those reactions from my family members, I was very confused, and then as I got older, I actually became a very quiet child, because I needed to just keep things to myself just to be safe.
Yeah, because how do you know? Was there anybody, and I suspect, you know, it shifted as you got older, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but was there anybody at that time that you could, at anywhere along the way, that you could start kind of having an inquiry with or asking really clear questions or pertinent questions?
I would talk to my cousin Natalie a lot, just, well, I really didn't have the language, right, for transgender or anything, right, being so young. But I would talk to her about, you know, it bothers me that I want to play with you and your friends and your toys, but my grandparents don't let me and my mother wouldn't let me, right? But never anything about my identity. It was more of just the things that I wanted to do, because when I was younger, I didn't see a difference.
Yeah, that's really great. And children don't. You know, children are taught prejudice and all of that. But yeah, like you said, it was all about the toys.
Right.
Yeah. And so then you mentioned an incident that was, again, compelling, playing on the beach with your cousin, I think, again, and having these sandcastles and mermaids, and, you know, you're engaged and loving it, and somebody comes up to you and says... So it was my uncle, actually, and in his mind, it wasn't what I was, again, supposed to be doing, being male-bodied, right? And being male-bodied, you're supposed to do certain things at the beach and not other things. Right. And I was doing those things that I wasn't supposed to be doing, right? And me and my cousin, again, having an amazing time, just whatever, enjoying the beach, right? Most kids love the beach. And I remember him coming over, stomping over this sandcastle, throwing the shells at me like, you're not supposed to be doing this. You know, you're confused, you need to stop hanging out with Natalie, things like that. Now you're best friend. Basically, best friend, my sister, my rock. I can't be with her anymore because I was doing some things wrong. And he was Natalie's father. So did they continue to intervene in that relationship?
No. I became a little more distant. Right. Personally, to everybody. I'd be very quiet. So like in middle school, I maybe had one friend. Right, just because I didn't know how people were going to react to me. So I became very quiet, and I isolated myself purposefully from everybody. You know,
so teenagers, first of all, go through all kinds of, you know, challenging stuff to begin with. And so now yours has taken on a bigger meaning and identity, so it becomes safer and safer just to kind of be somewhat invisible, yes? Not highly visible.
Exactly.
Yeah. So where did that start to shift for you? Where did you actually say enough is enough?
Actually, when I went to college, I go to Rutgers in New Brunswick, and I was exposed to my first out trans person. And I remember seeing him and being amazed and so happy because something inside of me told me that we are very similar in a lot of ways. And hearing his story and seeing that similar thoughts went through my head, right? And similar views on things, and especially with childhood, not seeing a difference in gender, right? And being learned gender. I just kind of realized that it's okay to be who I am. You know, I'm special, I'm an individual, and that's what makes me me, right? So now I just have to first accept myself, right, once I figured it out, and then slowly into the process of sharing my identity with others.
Was it anywhere along the way torturous or just confusing?
In the beginning, it was very confusing. So when I beginning of last year, I actually thought I just wanted to explore the drag world, right? So I would buy makeup and watch videos on how to do drag makeup. But then I realized I was going more towards what in the drag world is called fishy, so drag queens that look more like biological women. And I was going towards that makeup. I wanted to learn how to do that and that sort of blending and how that goes on. And then I just kind of realized that, and then my friend does drag, and I was like, I don't really want to be on the stage. I just want to look like him. And then it just kind of clicked in my head that I'm trans, I'm a woman, right? And there's a lot of conflict internally, right? Because I internalized a lot of homophobia and transphobia as well, growing up.
Of course.
And I remember nights crying myself to sleep because I knew I was trans, but I was still afraid to even tell my best friend. I was just afraid to tell anybody, and I felt very trapped.
Who's the first person that you told?
It was actually my friend Megan, by accident, actually. It was actually it was in December, this past December, and it was during winter break, and our dorm was open over winter break, so we both went down for further just to hang out, we spent the day, whatever, and we were just watching, I think we were watching The L Word or something like that, and she asked me like, how's home, and then I was saying something that my mother had said that kind of bothered me, and she was like, oh, why did it bother you? You know, being a good friend, trying to help me out, and then it just kind of came out. I just said, I'm trans. And she was just like, okay. Now how's that affecting you more with the situation?
Wow.
It was amazing.
What a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great that she didn't fixate on my trans identity. She just fixated on my experience.
Yes, yes, and yes. Yeah, it's, you know, it's like our combined humanity. Underneath it all, we've all got the same thing going on. And so you have an issue at home. It's not an issue about your gender identity. It's an issue about a human experience.
Experiences, yes.
Yeah, really great. So was it, I'm sorry, was it upsetting to you to have come out like that, or was it a relief?
At first I had mixed feelings.
Yes.
Because I was planning on sitting all my best friends down together, right, in my head, the perfect sharing of my identity to everybody. At first I was very upset at myself. I was like, why do I have to come out like this, right? I had this all planned, now it's gonna mess up my whole plan. But I was very happy, actually. Looking back, I'm very glad that it happened that way, because it allowed for conversation to just come naturally. Yes. And that helped me a lot process myself, even.
Wow, you know, you have to be a very strong individual because, you know, as you describe it, you know, crying yourself to sleep, kind of living a hidden identity, not even knowing how to clarify it for yourself, but really still being willing to kind of explore and going, okay, not that, and now I'm clear about that. I think, you know, one of the things, and they talk about this in some of the literature, about how, you know, there's this, in the world of psychology and their books of diagnosis or whatever, for a long time, they treated this as some kind of a psychological problem, and that's shifting. So it's really, again, about shifting the identity to being human being and not being seen as someone who's working out an issue.
Right, same thing with homosexuality. Homosexuality and trans identities have this very similar categorization in the DSM. Right, and I've taken psychology courses at Rutgers, and before it used to be called gender identity disorder, but now it's been changed to gender dysphoria, right? And there's some positives and negatives, personally, that I see. So the positives are it allows access, right? So when a health insurance company diagnoses you or a psychiatrist diagnosed with gender dysphoria, you can have access to hormones, right? You can have access to the services that really necessary health care, right? But also it's demonizing, right? It's illegitimizing a multitude of identities, right? So I see it as a double-edged sword.
Yes. And I think, again, if you're clear about what you're using it for, but that clarity I don't think is easy to come by. You seem to have kind of, again, this character, you know, who you are, and that you've kind of traveled this journey in a very almost intentional or unintentionally intentional way, and coming through in a very short period, just from December, telling your friend, and here you are talking about it, you know, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I think it's really the idea of not living as, I'm someone who needs to be fixed, and in other people's eyes as well, I'm just someone dealing with issues that surface in my life, and this is one of them, because of, if nobody cared, you wouldn't have to be doing any of this. So it's really, again, about educating and like a social justice educator. So let's talk about, as a social justice educator, what is your role specifically? What do you do?
So at our center at Rutgers, I work at the Social Justice Education LGBT Center at Rutgers, New Brunswick, and I coordinate and perform trainings and workshops for faculty, staff, and students. So a big focus that I like to do is intersectionality. So what that means is how our different identities, like our class identity, our racial identity, our ethnic identity, our gender identity, all kind of intersect to create you, right? Because in my experiences, everything's connected, right? Like what you were saying before, like, you know, I'm not just trans, I'm a person going through life, right? Like being trans isn't all that I am.
Right.
Right, I have so much, we call it invisible backpack. So like what other experiences and identities you have that are invisible.
Yes.
Right, so like growing up being trans, that was invisible. Right, and so I focus a lot on intersectionality, so like understanding how your identities intersect, how they affect how you navigate the world, who you talk to, how you conduct yourself in public, things like that.
So if someone's listening out there and they're kind of dealing with coming out, or even coming out to themselves, and then of course, you know, there's the whole family, society thing. What would you have wanted to hear anywhere along the line that would have been supportive?
I think what would have benefited me absolutely was, it's okay to be you. I feel like just that very simple sentence was something that I wish I had heard, because I thought it wasn't okay to be me. I thought no one would see me for me, and no one would accept me for me. For me, coming out to myself was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, right? Understanding that my body does not reflect how I see myself in my head, right? And someone telling me that that's okay, and you're not alone. I felt very alone. I didn't meet my first out trans person until college. I was 18, right? So going 18 years with all these thoughts and feelings and confusion and just a lot of emotions going on, and not having anybody. Right, I feel like if someone just said it's okay to be you and you're not alone, and that not really that it gets better, but that you get stronger. Right, it's that you start becoming confident in yourself, you becoming comfortable with yourself in some ways, and that allows you to navigate things better and situations better, because you know how to conduct yourself better within terms of yourself.
It's very powerful. You know, ultimately, that's what all of us want to hear anyway. It's okay to be you,
Exactly.
you know? And I think that, you know, there was this, I think it was attributed to Lena Horne, but this sentence of, it's not the weight of the load that weighs you down, or it's the way you carry it. And I think part of that is just, as you describe, what's very valuable is how you present in the world, because that impacts how people relate to you as well. If you go out in the world as someone feeling less than, or you know, terrified, or trying to be invisible, it creates certain reactions out there as well, as opposed to you come out, I'm okay with who I am. And they get to deal with it, but if you're okay, chances are good that it makes it easier for them to kind of approach you. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. So I personally believe in energy, right? So someone like when I was younger, would try to personally isolate myself and try not to make eye contact. I think that puts out a certain energy. And people pick up on that subconsciously or consciously, depending on the person, whether to, okay, I won't go up to that person, or I'll just keep walking.
Yes.
But I feel like once I became comfortable with myself and I started presenting, I just started having a better energy about myself. And I started understanding that for people to accept me, it's going to be difficult, right? There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, but I have to be brave and face them for me. So, and I feel like that changed my energy a lot and changed how people interact with me and how people engage me and how I engage others as well.
And what did you notice?
I think I noticed there was a lot of curiosity, definitely.
That's great. That's
definitely
great.
A lot of curiosity.
Curiosity is good, you know, because people, it's really, again, a lot of people's reactions that occur as prejudicial, sometimes they are prejudicial, just comes from unfamiliarity.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when someone says like a very ignorant or an invasive question, I think first you have to process it, and you also have to try to understand where they're coming from, right? Because they may not see it like that, or they just don't have the education or the exposure to know that that's a question you're not supposed to ask, right? Or it can be very personal. So I feel like when there's moments like that, you have to understand yourself, the situation you're in right now, and then understand where that person's coming from.
So I want to go back to like coming out to yourself even, and how painful that was. I find it almost miraculous that that happened a short time ago, and here you are. So let's talk a little bit about that, because it takes something to be able to do that transition and do it well. So what had that happen?
So for me, I categorize transitioning into 3 categories. So your personal transition, so coming out to yourself, your social transitioning, telling the people around you, and then your physical transition, which most people think of when they think of transition, right? Hormones, etc. So for me, I came out to myself, so my personal transition in late October. I was just in bed crying, and I just said it out loud for the first time. And I was in a state of depression for a lot of November, because I felt like no one would accept me. Even though I had trans friends and I was around trans people almost regularly, internally, right? Internalized transphobia was still holding me back. And then suddenly just clicked in my head that, you know, I've been living 19 years hiding myself and not being my true self. That needs to change. For my mental health, I need to change that. So then that's when I began my social transition, right? So I started telling Megan and my other friends and people I work with. And that's just been, I've had a mixed bag of reactions to be expected, but generally it's been great and very welcoming and very supportive, definitely. So.
That's great. And so what is it that, you know, so we're not just our gender identity. I don't immediately walk around thinking, I'm female, I'm female, I'm female. For you, it's different because there is this transition, but ultimately you're just a human being.
Exactly.
And as a human being, what is it that you want to do?
I would like I know it's very corny, but like I'd like to create a world, right, where people see trans folks as just regular folks, right? Because when people think, oh, you're trans, that's all they fixate on. That's all they think about. You're trans, you're trans, you're trans, right? And like we've seen in like interviews like with Laverne Cox and Carmen Carrera on the Katie Couric show, right, instantly about genitalia, right? And very personal, invasive questions, right? Do people ask you about your genitalia every day? No, exactly.
I hope not.
Right? So like people don't understand how ridiculous and how impersonal that is, right? Because when people think of trans people, we become objectified. We become bodies. We just become objects. We're not necessarily people, and people don't really know our lived experiences or how we navigate space. So I would like to almost create a world, or at least a space where people can learn that trans people aren't just trans. We all have a gender identity. Everyone does, right? This is just ours, right? And that there's so many other things that go into me and make up me.
And are you at the stage where, because I don't know too many people who are at the stage where they say they fully accept who they are, forget their gender identity.
Right.
Are you at the stage where you kind of really internally think, wow, I'm really okay?
I think it depends on day, actually. A lot of it's on my mood, right? So if I'm feeling confident that day, right, you know, this is who I am. I'm so happy that this is who I am. You know, society, I may have difficulties in society, but you know, at the end of the day, I'm happy with myself. And then some days, there's always that voice right in the back of your head, that kind of like the little like toad on your shoulder, a little angel.
The gremlin.
The gremlin, yes. That's just telling you different. right? Or like someone will like give me a look when I'm walking down the street, and I'll internalize that, and I'll just keep processing and keep thinking about it, keep thinking back. But generally, I feel like I am accepting of myself deep down.
Great.
But definitely there are days and moments where I'm not.
Yeah. Do you ever feel in danger?
I think that depends on my context, so my situation. So especially geography, right? Like where I am. So being in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, like metropolitan area, it's a huge privilege, right? Because there's resources, there's access, there's visibility. Especially with like the shows like Orange is the New Black, trans folks have really gotten a leg up in visibility, especially like Carmen Carrera in the beauty world, and really great advocates like Janet Mock. But generally where I've lived, I've generally felt safe. But at Rutgers, right, it just depends where in Rutgers you are. So I live on a campus that's very accepting and open-minded, so I have no problem there. But a different campus, I may not feel the same thing. And also time of day factors a lot into it. So I try not to travel alone, specifically.
And so again, one of the things that you said you would want to have heard is, you're okay. What is it, again, someone listening to you, and let's say you pushed yourself in the audience, what would you want to hear you say about the journey?
Oh, wow. I think I would want to say that there is no right way to do this journey. Everyone does it differently. So like the general notion or thought is that you're trapped in the wrong body, right? There's something wrong with you internally, right? But that's not true for everybody. It's true for a lot of people, but not for everybody. Like for me, that wasn't my case. I knew I wasn't trapped, I just knew what society was putting on me wasn't me. So I feel like that there is no right way, and your way is perfect for you, right? And take things at your pace. Don't let people pressure you into presenting and buying a wig right away the day you come out, or things like that. Just understanding that it takes time. It's a huge adjustment personally, right, to start seeing yourself a certain way and seeing yourself for your authentic self, right? So I guess if I was in the audience, I would want someone to tell me that take your time. Do what is best for you and what's safe for you.
Wow, that's great. That's really awesome. So in the workshops that you do, what is it that people come away with?
I think that depends on the type of workshop. So the one that I've done most is our Safer Space training, which is basically like how to become an ally to the whole LGBTQIA community, right? So like terminology, we go through earliest messages. I feel like the biggest takeaway in that one is seeing how people really think. Like they're like, wow, I didn't realize I learned this young, right? And I never knew that this community was so diverse, because we just think LGBTQIA, right? We just think that. That's it.
One lump sum.
One lump sum, right? But then we don't think about how each letter is its own community, and how each community is, even at the same time, it's one gigantic community, but at the same time, it's all different fractions. So I feel like a big takeaway is just understanding better of the community, and also just understanding ways how to effectively be an ally, right? So like, don't just be like, I love gay people, right? Or I have a trans friend, right? Because that's not effective. But understanding that, as not a member of the community, I've heterosexual privilege, right? Now, how does that affect me, and how does that affect the LGBT space that I enter, right? And how can I use that? I think that's the biggest takeaway.
That's really good. And what would you say to families? Again, families all have their own issues,
right?
And they're going to be accepting, not accepting, and I think there are, again, depending on the family, and there are different challenges along the way. But what is it that you can coach them to make it easier, not only for their children, but for themselves?
Definitely research, right? So when folks come out as trans to like their family, some people are even like, what does trans even mean, right? So I feel like if parents specifically would just do some research and still keep in the back of the head, it's still your child. Right? The name may be different, right? They may identify a different way than the doctor assigned them when they were born, but it's still your child. It's still a part of you, right? And just to educate yourself, because your child's going to go through a lot in society, or even though where we live is a great place, there's still not great people in it, right? But I feel like that's true for everywhere. So I feel like just educating and make yourself at least you probably won't be as aware as your child, but just aware enough to understand your child, and just at the end of the day, just show love, right? Because it's very hard, and there's a lot of love you need a lot of love, and just understand that it's still your child.
Yeah, and I think it's what you said also is, you know, allow yourself to get it at your own. There's no right way to do this, but at the same time, just be committed to it. And then, you know, what do you say to the children whose parents, you know, I know parents who've disowned their children because they married someone outside of their religion.
Right.
You know, so how devastating is that for the children? So what do you say to those who have parents who, that's it, you're done?
I feel like what I would want to say to them is, however you're feeling is absolutely valid. Hurt, disgust, outrage, whatever it is, it's totally valid, and that's yours. You know, own it. But I feel at the same time, needs to be that sort of understanding as why, right? So where is your family coming from, right? Like, what are their experiences that make them think a certain way, or that made them react the way that they did? So I feel like there needs to be an understanding of yourself and a lot of self-processing and self-reflection. Definitely, I think is self-care, very important, right? But I feel like just also understanding their situation and where they're coming from, right? So culture plays into a lot of it. Also, so understanding the culture maybe and the religion and seeing and understanding just where they're coming from to better understand the whole situation.
Yeah, and as you say, your feelings are your feelings, own them, feel them, but you can create a little bit of distance in that it's not as personal as it feels, because their choices come out of their history and their culture and their brainwashing. And then you get to make decisions as to whether you want to stay in that situation. But I would say reach out yourself to other communities to get what you need, the support you need. We are at the end of our time, and I can't believe it's gone so quickly, but thank you so much. I mean, I am very inspired by you.
Thank you.
And the work that you do and your journey. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much,
sharing
Natasha,
it
for
here.
having me. It's such a privilege to be
You're
here.
quite welcome.
Thank you.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.